My aunt's hand trembled as she gripped mine, her eyes cloudy but sharp with urgency. Her final whisper cut through the hospital's beeping silence. "Check the attic trunk." And then, she was gone. I thought grief was making me hear things. I told myself she was hallucinating, that it was just the ramblings of a dying woman. But that night, alone in her creaking old house in New Hampshire, her words clawed at my chest like they were alive. I climbed into the dusty attic, the single bulb flickering above me, shadows crawling across boxes I hadn't touched in years. And there it was, an iron trunk, chained shut, the lock rusted like it hadn't been opened in decades. My hands shook as I pried it open. The smell of mildew, the scrape of metal, the weight of secrets pressing in around me. And then, a thick envelope slid out, sealed with black wax. On the front, written in my aunt's handwriting, were just 2 words. "For Emily." My knees buckled. Because in that moment, I realized, this wasn't grief. This was a message. A warning. And a door to a truth my family never wanted me to find. I froze there in the attic, clutching the envelope, and suddenly, every memory I had buried came rushing back. After my mom died, my dad remarried in less than 8 months. His new wife, Melissa, made sure I never forgot that I wasn't really part of their new family. My bedroom. It wasn't upstairs with the warm carpet and curtains. It was in the basement, concrete floor, pipes dripping overhead, a single mattress shoved into the corner. I remember lying there at night, shivering, listening to the laughter upstairs, wondering if they even remembered I existed. My birthdays passed like shadows. No candles, no presents, not even a happy birthday. At the dinner table, I always ate last, when the food was already cold. And whenever I dared to complain, Melissa would sneer and whisper, "You're nothing but a reminder of his biggest mistake." The only person who ever fought for me was Aunt Margaret. She would sneak me slices of cake, leave blankets on my bed, and look me in the eyes when no one else did. She'd squeeze my hand and whisper, "One day, Emily, they'll regret this." But when I tore the seal open, what fell into my lap wasn't just paper. It was a deed. A legal document. And the name written on top didn't belong to my father, or Melissa. It belonged to me. And now, holding this envelope in the attic, I realized, this was that day. My breath caught in my throat. The document slipped from my fingers and scattered across the attic floor. A property deed, thick, official, stamped. The ink was faded, but the name at the very top was clear. Emily Carter. My name. Not my father's. Not Melissa's. Mine. The words blurred as my eyes filled with tears. I was shaking so hard I had to press the paper against my chest to steady it. For so long, I had been invisible, treated like an unwanted ghost in my own home. And now, right here in my hands, was proof that my aunt had seen me. That she had fought for me. That I wasn't powerless at all. The attic seemed to tilt, shadows stretching longer as the bulb flickered above me. I stumbled back against the wall, whispering to myself, "This can't be real, this can't be real." But it was. It had been filed years ago, signed by a lawyer whose name I didn't recognize, stamped by the county. My aunt had hidden everything, quietly, carefully, waiting for this very moment. I should have felt relief. Triumph. But what I felt instead was fear. Because if my father ever discovered this, if Melissa even suspected, they would destroy me before I ever had the chance to use it. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, and for the first time in my life, a thought cut through the fear like fire. I'm not the girl in the basement anymore. I have power. And I will use it. But before I could even catch my breath, the floorboards creaked behind me. A shadow fell across the attic door, and my father's voice slurred up from the stairs. "Emily, what are you hiding up there?" The attic door groaned open, and the sour smell of whiskey hit me before his shadow even appeared. My father, Mark Carter, swayed on the steps, eyes bloodshot, jaw clenched. "What are you hiding up here, Emily?" he barked, his voice thick with liquor and contempt. I shoved the deed into the folds of my jacket, praying he hadn't seen it. My pulse hammered so hard I thought he could hear it echoing through the rafters. He staggered closer, his boots scraping against the floorboards. "You think you've got secrets? You think you're smarter than me?" His hand shot out, gripping my arm so hard I winced. His face loomed inches from mine, breath reeking of alcohol. "You eat because I let you eat. You breathe because I allow it. Don't you ever forget that." Every word was venom, each syllable a chain trying to drag me back into the basement. For years, I had swallowed my screams, buried my anger, convinced myself silence was survival. But tonight, something cracked inside me. His grip hurt, but it wasn't stronger than the truth burning in my pocket. I stared back at him, my voice trembling but steady enough to say the words I'd never dared whisper before. "You're wrong. I'm not powerless anymore." His eyes widened for a split second, surprise, maybe even fear, but then his face twisted into a cruel smile. "Just like your mother. Always dreaming she could rise above me. And look where she ended up." The attic seemed to collapse in on itself. My chest tightened. He was mocking her death. My mother's death. And in that moment, hatred and clarity fused into one single vow. Good revenge isn't spoken. It's executed. Downstairs, I heard Melissa's sharp voice calling, "Mark. What's taking so long?" And I knew, if either of them discovered what I had in my jacket, the truth my aunt had left for me, they would never let me walk out of this house alive. I waited until the house fell silent again, until Mark stumbled back downstairs, until Melissa's sharp voice turned into muffled complaints in the kitchen. Only then did I dare to move. Clutching the deed against my chest, I scanned the attic one more time. That's when I noticed it. A crooked picture frame, half hidden by dust, hanging on the stairwell wall. It had always looked out of place, gaudy, heavy, like it belonged in another century. Aunt Margaret used to mutter that she hated it, but for some reason, she never took it down. Something in my gut told me to look closer. My fingers trembled as I lifted it off the nail. The wood was heavier than it should have been. I turned it over, and froze. The back wasn't solid. It was false. My heart slammed against my ribs as I pried it open. A flash drive, wrapped in yellowed paper, slid into my palm. Scribbled in my aunt's handwriting were the words. "He tried to protect you. They silenced him." My breath caught. Protect me? Who? I ran to my room, locked the door, and plugged the flash drive into my old laptop. The screen flickered, and grainy footage filled the monitor. My chest tightened. It was a man's face. Someone I hadn't seen in over a decade. Mr. Harris. My high school history teacher. The one who vanished after a scandal no one ever fully explained. The video crackled. His voice was urgent, tired, but clear enough. "Emily, if you're watching this, then Margaret trusted you with the truth. I tried to warn them. I tried to save you. But your father, and Melissa, they made sure my career, my life, disappeared. Don't believe what they told you. None of it was true. And now it's your turn to finish what your mother couldn't." My throat went dry. The room spun. Memories rushed back, Mr. Harris shielding me from cruel jokes, standing up when no one else did. And then, suddenly, he was gone. They said he'd confessed. That he was dangerous. But deep down, I'd always known it didn't make sense. Now, watching his weary eyes stare through the screen, everything snapped into place. This wasn't just family cruelty anymore. This was a cover-up. A conspiracy. And then, as the video ended, one last line appeared on the screen, words typed in all caps, shaking as if written in a rush. If she ever speaks, they will destroy her. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. Because I knew exactly who she was. Me. The words on the laptop screen burned into my mind. If she ever speaks, they will destroy her. My hands shook as I pulled the flash drive out, terrified that even keeping it plugged in was somehow dangerous. I shoved it deep into my pocket, but my heart wouldn't calm. I needed answers. Real answers. That night, when the house was quiet, I crept back to the attic with only a flashlight. I tore through boxes, drawers, anything my aunt could have hidden. And then, beneath a stack of old quilts, I found it. A leather-bound journal. The edges frayed, the pages worn soft by time. My breath caught in my throat as I flipped it open and saw her handwriting. My mother's handwriting. The first entry made my knees give out. I collapsed onto the attic floor, the flashlight beam trembling across the ceiling. He hits me. I'm scared. If anything happens to me, please know, it was not an accident. He says if I ever try to leave, he'll make sure no one ever believes me. I have nowhere else to turn. I just pray Margaret will find this one day. Tears blurred the ink, my chest tightening until I could barely breathe. My mother, she hadn't fallen down the stairs. She hadn't been weak or careless. She had been trapped. Terrorized. Silenced. Every page was another wound. Bruises described in detail. Nights locked in rooms with no lights. Plans to run away, always crushed by threats, by fear. And then, the last entry, written days before her death. If I disappear, Emily, please don't believe their story. Please don't let them erase me. I am fighting for you, even if I lose. My sobs echoed in the empty attic, raw and jagged. For years, I'd hated her in silence, hated her for leaving me, for not protecting me. And now, with the truth carved into these pages, the guilt was unbearable. She hadn't abandoned me. She had died trying to save me. I pressed the journal to my chest, rocking back and forth, whispering into the darkness, I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't know. I didn't know. But as grief swallowed me whole, one question clawed its way through the pain. If my mother had written all this, then why had no one ever seen it? And that's when I noticed the photograph tucked between the last pages, a faded picture of my mother smiling by the fireplace. But in the mirror behind her, almost hidden in the blur, stood a man. A man I recognized instantly. Uncle Barry. The photo slipped from my hands and fluttered onto the attic floor. My mother's smile, frozen in time, but behind her, the reflection in that old mirror. Uncle Barry. Not just a co-worker of my father's. Not just the man who showed up at our family barbecues with that hollow laugh. He had been there. In my house. In the shadows of my mother's final days. My blood went cold. The journal's words echoed in my ears, if I disappear, Emily, please don't believe their story. She hadn't just been warning me about my father. She had been warning me about them. I clutched the photo so tight it nearly tore. For years, I'd endured their cruelty, the basement, the birthdays forgotten, the whispers that I was nothing but a mistake. I thought that was the worst they could do. But now I understood, that cruelty was just the mask. Beneath it, there was rot. Violence. A conspiracy deeper than I ever imagined. For the first time, grief didn't paralyze me. It sharpened me. My tears dried on my cheeks, replaced by something hotter, heavier. Rage. I whispered into the dark attic, almost as if speaking to my mother's ghost. You didn't die for nothing. I swear to you, I will make them pay. The air seemed to shift, as if the house itself was listening. And that's when I made my first move. The next morning, I walked into Aunt Margaret's lawyer's office, the journal and the photograph clutched to my chest. His brows furrowed as he read, flipping each page with growing urgency. When he looked up, his voice was grave. "Emily, this isn't just abuse. This is homicide. And with these records, we can reopen the case." My pulse thundered. The word homicide rang in my skull like a bell tolling for war. That evening, when I returned home, my father was sitting in his armchair with the newspaper spread wide. The headline screamed, "Cold case to be reopened after 20 years." He looked up at me, eyes blazing, jaw tight. "You think you're smart, Emily?" he spat. "Keep digging, and you'll end up just like her." The newspaper headline still burned in my father's hands as I retreated to my room, heart pounding. His threat echoed in my head, "You'll end up just like her." That night, I couldn't sleep. The journal lay open beside me, the photo of my mother with Barry's reflection staring like a ghost from the past. My chest ached with grief and rage, but something else gnawed at me too, an emptiness I couldn't name. Why had I always felt like an outsider in my own bloodline? Why did my aunt treat me like the one fragile truth she had to protect? The answer came the next morning. Aunt Margaret's lawyer called me back, his voice low, measured, as if every word might shatter the ground beneath me. "Emily, I think you should come in. There's something else your aunt left for you." I rushed to his office, my hands clammy, my throat dry. On his desk lay an old envelope, its edges yellowed, stamped with the seal of a private clinic. Inside, a single sheet. A DNA test. My eyes scanned the page, each line sinking like a stone into my stomach. The column marked, "Biological father." It didn't say Mark Carter. It said, "David Miller." I staggered back, the paper trembling in my hands. My father, the man who'd locked me in basements, who mocked my very existence, wasn't even my father at all. I could barely breathe. Who is David Miller?" I whispered. The lawyer slid another photo across the table. A younger man, tall, kind eyes, standing next to my mother in what looked like a college classroom. They were smiling, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "He was a professor in Maine," the lawyer explained softly. "Your mother met him before she married Mark. They loved each other. She was pregnant when Mark found out. That's when everything changed." The room blurred, my ears ringing. Memories I'd never understood suddenly made sense, my father's obsession with control, his hatred, the constant reminder that I was a mistake. I wasn't his mistake. I was his revenge. Tears burned my eyes, but beneath them, something stronger took root. If David Miller was out there, alive, then maybe I wasn't as alone as I'd always believed. Maybe the blood in my veins wasn't tainted by Mark's cruelty. Maybe I still belonged to someone who once loved me. The lawyer leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Emily, your aunt arranged for you to meet him. He's been waiting for years. And if what he told Margaret is true, he might still have proof of what happened to your mother." For the first time in years, a fragile spark of hope flickered inside me. David Miller. A name, a face, a possibility that not all of my blood was poisoned by Mark Carter's cruelty. I wanted to believe that somewhere out there was a man who might still care that I existed. But hope, in my house, was a dangerous thing. That same night, as I slipped the DNA results back into my jacket, I caught Melissa watching me from the kitchen doorway. Her smile was thin, brittle, like glass about to shatter. "Late-night errands, Emily?" she purred, her eyes sharp. "Or are you hiding something?" My stomach dropped. She knew. Maybe not everything, but enough to sense that her control was slipping. I avoided her gaze, muttered something about school papers, and hurried upstairs. But when I shut my door, I froze. The handle rattled. Slowly, deliberately. My pulse roared in my ears as I shoved the papers under a loose floorboard. I didn't breathe until the footsteps faded away. But the message was clear, they were watching. Always. 2 days later, I packed my bag to leave for the lawyer's office again. I wanted to ask about David, to beg for a way to meet him. But as I stepped out the front door, I noticed something strange. The mailbox was ajar. Inside, no letters, just a scrap of paper, folded in half. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. 5 words, scrawled in jagged ink. You're being followed. Be careful. I spun around, the streets suddenly too quiet, every parked car a threat. My breath hitched. I backed into the house, bolted the door, and pressed my forehead against the wood. Inside, Mark's voice thundered from the living room. Melissa. Where's Emily? She's been sneaking around too much lately. Melissa's reply was cold, sharp, I told you. She knows something. And if she talks, she'll ruin us both. My legs buckled. They weren't hiding it anymore. They weren't even pretending. I staggered to my room, shut the door, and whispered to myself, I need to leave. Now. Before they destroy me the way they destroyed her. But as I reached for my phone to call the lawyer, the screen lit up with a text from an unknown number. It said, meet me. Tomorrow. 3 p.m. At the old train depot. I know your real father. Come alone. I dropped the phone, my heart slamming into my ribs. Because outside my window, just barely visible through the curtains, a shadow shifted. Someone was already there. Watching. The summons arrived faster than I ever expected. A thick envelope, stamped with the county seal, slid under our front door one gray morning. Melissa tore it open before I could reach it. Her eyes darted across the page, and her face drained of color. Mark, it's about your wife. About her death. Mark snatched the paper, his jaw tightening as he read. For the first time, silence fell between them. No insults. No sneers. Just dread. And then he looked at me. His stare was pure fire. What did you do? He hissed. I said nothing. Because the truth was louder than anything I could say. The courthouse smelled of dust and old wood, the kind of place where time seemed to linger. I sat on the witness bench, my hands clasped so tight my knuckles ached. Across the aisle, Mark adjusted his tie with trembling fingers. Melissa kept her gaze fixed on the floor. The prosecutor rose, her voice sharp. Your Honor, this is not just about family disputes. This is about a homicide buried for 20 years. And we now have evidence that proves it. My chest tightened. This was it, the moment my mother's voice would finally be heard. The first witness called was Laura Jenkins, my mother's closest friend, missing from town since the funeral. She stepped to the stand, gray hair pulled back, eyes glistening with courage. She told me he would kill her, Laura said, her voice breaking. The night before she died, she called me crying, terrified. And then, she was gone. Melissa shifted uncomfortably, her nails digging crescents into her palms. Mark stared straight ahead, his face stone. But it wasn't stone enough. Because the next witness shattered everything. An older man with weary eyes and a steady step walked forward. He adjusted his glasses and swore the oath. I am Dr. Leonard Briggs. I was the county medical examiner 20 years ago. And I was ordered to alter the autopsy report of Emily's mother. The courtroom erupted in gasps. My heart nearly stopped. The judge banged the gavel for silence. Ordered. By whom? Dr. Briggs unfolded a worn paper from his pocket. His hand shook as he handed it over. By the county prosecutor at the time. Richard Sloan. acting on behalf of the Carter family patriarch. My stomach turned to ice. Richard Sloan. The man still sitting high in politics. A name that held power in every corner of New Hampshire. This wasn't just my father's crime anymore. This was a web that stretched into the halls of justice itself. I gripped the bench, my pulse racing. Everything I thought I knew about my family's darkness, it had just multiplied. And then Mark finally broke his silence. He leaned forward, his voice low but venomous, staring straight at me. You think you've won, Emily? You've just started a war you can't survive. The courtroom buzzed like a hive after Dr. Briggs dropped his bombshell. Richard Sloan. A name everyone in town knew. A man who had climbed from county prosecutor to state senator. A man whose smile graced billboards with the words, integrity, justice, family. And now, here he was, a shadow looming over my mother's death. The prosecutor's voice cut through the noise. Your Honor, this revelation changes the scope of the case. What we have here is not only homicide but obstruction of justice at the highest level. The judge's gavel struck. This case is now under federal jurisdiction. Court adjourned until further notice. I stepped outside into the chill air, cameras flashing in my face. Reporters shouted my name. Emily, is it true your father covered up a murder? Did you know about Richard Sloan's involvement? I pushed past them, my heart hammering. This wasn't just my fight anymore. The rot went deeper, into politics, into the law, into the very system that was supposed to protect people like my mother. That night, I sat in Aunt Margaret's old Vermont house, the deed spread across the table beside the journal and the photo of Uncle Barry. My hands trembled as I flipped through everything again, searching for threads I had missed. And then, in the margins of my mother's journal, I noticed a name scribbled faintly. Not just Mark or Barry. It was Sloan. I whispered it into the empty room, my voice cracking. She knew. She knew it was bigger than our house. The phone rang, making me jump. It was the federal prosecutor assigned to the case. Her voice was firm, unshaken. Emily, listen to me. You're no longer dealing with just your father and his accomplices. This is a network. Powerful men. Old money. Political favors buried under decades of silence. They will try to intimidate you. They will try to silence you. But you have the evidence. And we will protect you. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust the system. But hadn't the system already failed my mother? Failed Mr. Harris? Failed me? I stared at the documents scattered around me, the attic photo with Barry's reflection, the altered autopsy, the DNA test that revealed David Miller as my true father. The deeper I went, the more I realized this wasn't just revenge anymore. It was war. Days later, as I left the courthouse after another hearing, a man brushed past me in the crowd. I barely saw his face, but when I looked down, a folded note was in my hand. My fingers shook as I opened it. 5 words scrawled across the page. Stop now, or disappear forever. I looked up, scanning the sea of faces. For a split second, I caught sight of Richard Sloan's cold eyes across the street. He wasn't just a name in a file anymore. He was watching me. And suddenly, I understood. My family's corruption had never been contained within our walls. It was woven into the fabric of power itself. And I was standing right in the center of its spiral. I sat alone in Aunt Margaret's Vermont house, the old floorboards creaking under my restless pacing. The warning note still burned in my pocket, stop now, or disappear forever. For hours, fear gnawed at me. My father had threatened me my whole life. Melissa had whispered poison into my ears. Sloane's shadow now stretched beyond my family into every corridor of power. But as the night dragged on, fear slowly began to twist into something else. I looked around the room, the journal my mother left behind, the deed my aunt had hidden, the photos that exposed Barry, the files salvaged from years of silence. Each artifact was more than just evidence. They were fragments of the women who had fought for me when no one else would. I pressed the journal to my chest, tears stinging my eyes. Mom, Aunt Margaret, you tried to protect me. You left me the map. Now it's my turn to finish the journey. The next morning, I walked into the federal prosecutor's office with a suitcase full of documents, recordings, and files. The clerk's eyes widened as I heaved it onto the table. "What's all this?" she asked. I looked her straight in the eye. My voice didn't shake this time. "This is everything. Every bruise they covered. Every lie they told. Every secret they thought would rot in the dark. Not anymore." For the first time, I wasn't speaking as the girl locked in the basement. I wasn't the forgotten child or the shadow servant of Mark and Melissa Carter. I was Emily Carter, the heir not just to land, but to truth. The prosecutor called me later that week, her voice steady but softer this time. "Emily, what you've built, this isn't just testimony. It's a case strong enough to bring them down. Not just your father. Not just Melissa. Even Sloan. We're filing." I closed my eyes as relief flooded through me. My hands shook, not from fear, but from release. That night, I stood on the porch of the Vermont house, the crisp air biting at my cheeks. I whispered into the trees. "I'm not the girl in the basement anymore. I'm the woman who will burn their lies to the ground." But just as I felt the first breath of freedom, headlights swept across the driveway. A black sedan rolled to a stop. And when the door opened, my stomach dropped. Because stepping out of the car wasn't the federal prosecutor. It was Melissa. And she was smiling. Melissa's smile in the driveway haunted me for nights. But even her sudden appearance couldn't smother the fire already burning inside me. Because in the middle of all the chaos, the name David Miller pulsed like a beacon in my mind. I needed to see him. To know if he was real. To know if there was someone in this world whose blood wasn't poisoned with cruelty. We met in a quiet cafe 2 towns over. I arrived early, clutching the DNA results in my bag, my palms slick with sweat. Every passing minute felt like a year. And then the door opened. He was older now, silver hair at his temples, lines etched deep around his eyes, but when he saw me, his whole body seemed to break. His hands shook. His eyes filled with tears before he even spoke. "Emily. God, you look just like her." I couldn't move at first. Couldn't breathe. But when he stepped closer, I let him pull me into an embrace, strong, trembling, desperate. And for the first time in my life, I felt what it meant to be held without condition. We sat across from each other, the air thick with years of silence. Finally, he reached into his coat and slid a bundle across the table. "Your mother gave this to me the night before she was gone. She told me if anything ever happened, I was to keep it safe for you." My throat tightened as I untied the bundle. Inside were letters, my mother's handwriting, delicate but hurried. The first one made my blood run cold. "David, if you are reading this, Mark knows. He found out the truth about Emily. He swore he would never raise another man's child. He said if I tried to leave, he would make me vanish, and take her with me. I think he's already planning something. If anything happens, protect her. Promise me you'll protect her." Tears blurred the ink. My stomach knotted. David's voice shook as he whispered. "I tried, Emily. I tried to fight him. But he had friends in places I couldn't reach. One night, I was attacked outside my apartment. Beaten. Warned to disappear or lose everything. So I vanished. I thought your aunt could shield you better than I could. The cafe walls seemed to close in. I gripped the table, my chest burning with rage and grief. My whole life, I had thought my father hated me because I was weak. Because I was a mistake. But the truth was worse. He hated me because I wasn't his at all. And my mother, my beautiful, broken mother, had died not only because she tried to escape, but because she dared to love another man. David leaned forward, his voice low, urgent. Emily, there's something else. Before your mother died, she mentioned a second dossier. Evidence she had hidden away. Do you know where it is? My breath caught. My mind flashed back to the attic, to the creepy porcelain doll I had never dared to touch. And in that instant, I knew exactly where the truth was buried. That night, David's words rattled in my mind like thunder. She mentioned a second dossier. Evidence she had hidden away. I drove back to Aunt Margaret's house in Vermont, my headlights cutting through the fog. The image wouldn't leave me, the porcelain doll in the attic. The one with cracked porcelain cheeks, glassy eyes that seemed to follow me as a child. I used to avoid it, terrified of its silent stare. Now, I understood why my mother had chosen it. Because no one would ever look there. The attic was colder than I remembered, the air thick with dust and secrets. I swept the beam of my flashlight across boxes and quilts until it landed on the doll, slumped in the corner in its faded burgundy dress. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The porcelain was brittle, the seams frayed. For a moment, I almost couldn't do it. It felt like desecrating some childhood ghost. But then I remembered my mother's voice from her journal, if I disappear, Emily, don't let them erase me. With a sharp inhale, I grabbed a knife and pressed it into the seam at the back of the doll. The porcelain cracked, the sound splitting the silence like a gunshot. I pried it open, and my breath caught. Inside, wrapped in plastic to survive the years, was a bundle of folded papers. The dossier. I ripped the plastic away, my eyes racing across the pages. Receipts. Signed checks. Photographs. Dates. And then, the letter. In my mother's handwriting, bold and furious despite the fear. This is my confession. Mark Carter is not just abusive, he is dangerous. He has threatened my life, and he is conspiring with Barry Jensen and Richard Sloan to bury the truth. If anything happens to me, this is my proof. Tears blurred the words as I turned page after page. Every accusation backed by documents, by signatures, by undeniable evidence. It wasn't just whispers in a journal anymore. This was a weapon. And it was mine now. The next morning, I carried the dossier straight to the federal prosecutor. She flipped through it, her face paling, then hardening with each page. Finally, she closed the file and looked at me, her eyes burning with resolve. Emily, this is it. With this, we don't just have enough to convict your father and Melissa. We can take down Sloan. This is going federal. You've just cracked open one of the biggest cases in the state's history. For a moment, I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. My mother's whispers, my aunt's last words, every sleepless night in the basement, all of it had led here. The truth was no longer buried. It was alive, roaring, unstoppable. But just as relief washed over me, the prosecutor's phone buzzed. She read the message, her face draining of color. She turned to me slowly. Emily, someone leaked. They know you found the dossier. And they're coming for you. The room tilted, my heartbeat exploding in my chest. For the first time, I wasn't just holding the truth. I was holding a target on my back. The days after the dossier surfaced were a blur of hearings, headlines, and arrests. Mark Carter and Melissa were taken into custody within 48 hours. Barry Jensen was found hiding in a cabin near the border. And Richard Sloan, once untouchable, was forced to step down as the federal indictment rolled across the evening news. For the first time, their power meant nothing. The lies that had held me captive my entire life had finally shattered. The trial lasted months. I testified, my voice steady as I laid out every bruise, every whispered threat, every piece of evidence my mother and aunt had protected for me. I thought I would break under the weight of it, but instead, I grew stronger. Because every word I spoke was not just mine. It was theirs. When the verdict came, the courtroom was silent. Guilty. On all counts. The gavel struck, and with it, the chains that had bound me for 20 years finally fell away. That night, I returned to the Vermont house. The house that once felt like a hiding place now felt like a sanctuary. I walked to the porch, holding my mother's journal in one hand and Aunt Margaret's letter in the other. The autumn wind whispered through the trees, carrying their voices with it. I lit a single candle, set the journal beside it, and whispered. You tried to protect me. You left me the truth. And now, I will carry it forward. For you. For me. For everyone who was ever silenced. Tears streamed down my face, but this time, they weren't just grief. They were release. They were strength. Today, I'm not the girl in the basement anymore. I'm not the unwanted shadow. I am Emily Carter. And I've turned my family's darkness into a foundation of light. With the inheritance my aunt left me, I built a center for survivors, women and children who, like my mother, were once told no one would believe them. Each room bears the name of someone who refused to be erased. And in the center, the largest room of all, hangs a plaque that reads, "The truth always scares you first. But then, it frees you." Aunt Margaret's words. My mother's legacy. My vow. So if you're listening to this, remember, silence protects abusers. But speaking, even when your voice shakes, can save lives. Your past may be filled with pain, but your future can still be built on truth. I am living proof.